If any time in the past, from your childhood till now, you were given or prescribed or voluntarily took antibiotics, then more than likely your immune system has been compromised, your gut biome has been thrown off balance, the intestinal flora in your system is out of whack, and I'm going to show you a natural way for you to start to restore that balance and so you can live a natural life in an unnatural world. Okay, I think it's important to start with why we're doing this. The reason we're doing this, again, is to live a natural life in an unnatural world. If we were living a more natural life, eating directly from the fruit trees, eating off from the ground, then more than likely we'd have soil-borne organisms, natural flora getting into our system, into our colon, into our stomach to help with digestion. Unfortunately, the lifestyle that we live these days, we're not getting enough real food with real enzymes, with natural good bacteria. So, and in addition, most importantly, antibiotics developed over the years, and those are intended to eliminate bad microbes from the body. But one of the side effects is that it also eliminates good microbes from the body, what we call good bacteria, the stuff in your system that helps you digest food, helps release and create nutrients that your body needs. So, one of the reasons we're doing this is to replenish that. If you've ever taken any antibiotics throughout your life, then more than likely, not only have you killed the bad microbes that your doctor or health practitioner may have been focusing on, but you also eliminate the good microbes so that your digestion has been compromised. All right, so this is something to be aware of so that people will tell you to eat yogurt or sauerkraut. Now, the thing about that is, in my opinion, if you're going to be eating store-bought sauerkraut or store-bought yogurt, more than likely those products have to be pasteurized in order to pass certain guidelines to be sold to the public. And once you pasteurize it, which basically means just heating it, boiling it, you're killing all the enzymes. It's no longer a living organism. So what I'm going to show you now is how to create kimchi, a very popular cultured vegetable that, because of the fermentation that occurs in the process of it forming, you'll be able to put good bacteria back in your system and help rebalance yourself. So the first thing I'm going to do is just share with you some of what you'll need. It's very simple, and once you do it once, you'll realize how easy it is. First thing I'm going to share is just some of the tools that you'll need. One is you're going to need a mason jar to store and to ferment the kimchi. Now, you might be familiar with some of the standard mason jars that have a two-part lid, a cap, and then the actual screw-on. I found those to be not quite effective for two reasons. When the fermentation occurs, pressure builds up inside the bottle, and the cap of this standard mason jar tends to buckle. And once it buckles, it's no longer flat, and you can basically only use it once before you have to either get new covers or get a new metal. So what I've switched to are these mason jars that have a lid, hinge lid. They have rubber seals and a gasket that you can use to seal it, to make it airtight. So I find these much more effective. They can be used over and over again, cleans very well, and does the job. One thing I'll just mention here, since we're on this topic, is during the 24 to 48 hours that the fermentation is occurring, you might want to interrupt the process slightly, just loosen very slightly the cap to release some of the pressure, and then close it back and keep the fermentation going. And I'll get to that later on. Next thing, you're going to need a grater to grate the carrots. You'll need a container to create the brine that you're going to soak the cabbage in for 24 hours. Alright, and that's it as far as the tools are concerned. Now the ingredients. Water. I use a natural 100% mountain spring water. You can obviously use, reverse osmosis filtered water as well, but I wanted to use as something as natural as possible, so I went with the spring water. Next, Himalayan pink salt. You can use sea salt. If you do a search on the internet, you'll find that there are many different salts that can be used. In fact, the traditional Korean style kimchi uses Korean solar salt. You can look that up. But I have found the Himalayan pink salt to be best. One thing I would suggest you not use is regular table salt that has anti-caking agents, and it also has dextrose, which is sugar. So you don't want to inhibit the fermentation process in any way by adding extra chemicals that are not necessary. So strictly sea salt, and I use Himalayan pink salt for mine as well. Next, you'll need Napa cabbage, sometimes called Chinese cabbage. This is about maybe 1.5 pounds, 2 pounds that I got. You'll also need what we call scallion. Americans will call it green onion. Some garlic, ginger, and by the way, I do my best to use local produce as much as possible. So unfortunately, the cabbage isn't grown locally here, nor the garlic. I think there are some farmers who may have it, but I haven't seen it around. Fortunately, however, the ginger and the scallion I do get locally, so these are all locally grown. Alright, and also red pepper powder. These are more like flakes, red pepper flakes. And one other thing I forgot to mention with the ingredients is carrots. I will probably only use 1.5 of these, so maybe a pound of carrots. So what I'll be doing is showing you how to create your own kimchi for less than that amount right there per ounce. Alright, so the first step is really very simple. All we're going to do is we're going to soak the cabbage in salt water in brine for 24 hours, and then we're going to continue with the process. So what I'll do is simply split it down the middle, and then split each one again. So now I have my 2 halves, or my 2/4. Alright, now this is my container for doing the soaking, the overnight soaking. So I'm going to put my cabbage in here. And just from experience, I have found that about this much, maybe 3/4 of a 2-pound cabbage will suffice. So that's what I have here in this container, and all I'm going to do now is put salt and water to fill it up till it's covered, and then let it sit for 24 hours or so. Some people say 6 hours, 12 hours. I like to do mine for 24 hours. So let's do some measuring so we can get quantities right. Now I usually just eyeball these, but I'll be a little more specific this time so we can establish a standard recipe. So this is a 1/4 cup of sea salt, of Himalayan pink salt. And I'm just going to sprinkle that over it. And that should be about enough. Let me just put a little bit more, so let's call that 1/2 cup altogether. So let's say 1/2 cup of salt, and then we're going to fill it with water. I'm going to use my mason jar so we can get an accurate measurement of how much water is used. 32. 22. That's 64 ounces. That's just about enough to cover it, but let's just put another cup. Let's put another 8 ounces. So that's what we're looking at. Now here's the kimchi after about 22 hours, and you can see it's soaked through. Now the salt does a few things. It pulls moisture out of the vegetables so that they remain crunchy even during the fermentation process. It also alters the structure of the cabbage and releases certain nutrients so that it tastes cooked even though it's raw. And then finally it prevents certain mold from developing. So definitely soaking it in salt is a very necessary part of the process, but we're going to wash it now. We're going to drain off the brine and then wash it so we can remove the excess salt, because we don't want it to be too salty. Now you might be wondering where the bacteria comes from that age in the fermentation. And they've actually done studies and determined that in a lot of the foods we eat, a lot of the fruits, vegetables, and particularly in the cabbage and the garlic that we're going to be using, there are already bacteria, good bacteria, lactobacillus, plantarum, that are naturally present, and those are what aids the fermentation process in the kimchi. So even though we've salted it and washed it, there's still good bacteria present, good microbes present, and those are what we are going to encourage by the addition of the garlic, not so much the peppers, but other people use different ingredients in their kimchi. Some people use radishes, some people put fish oil, also some sort of fermented fish. Since I'm vegan, I don't do that. Mine is all plant-based. So now with the kimchi washed about 2 or 3 times, I'm going to cut it up. Some people like their kimchi cut in very large pieces. I like mine cut very small, almost diced and shredded. That way it lasts longer. That way I can mix it in salads. I can mix it in tabbouleh. I can mix it in other dishes. And it's not too overpowering in whatever amounts that I want. For the scallions, I'm using just about 2 or 3 stalks, and I'm not using all of it. I'm just using the lower half with the root still intact. I wash those, and then I just cut them up into about 1-inch strips. So this will add, there's more flavor, more of an oniony flavor in the lower part, so that's what I want to get into the mixture. All right, now this is local ginger. Garlic. Let's take a quick look. Okay, really important about the cayenne pepper flakes. Very important, if you were to buy this brand, that you buy the coarse. You can see a little window here that shows this is not the fine ground powder. That's not the one you want. You want coarse, so it looks more like flakes, coarsely ground, so it has more visibility on the kimchi and replicates that nice kimchi look. And I think if you were to use straight ground, finely ground pepper, it would be a bit too spicy. For those of you who like spice, you may want to experiment with that, but I don't. So I stick to the coarse flakes. Now let's see. Again, usually I just eyeball these. So let's start with a 1/4 cup so we can get an accurate measurement. Okay, let's start with 1/4 cup. All right, definitely not enough. Add another 1/4 cup. There's a certain look that we're going for. We want it to coat everything. And again, since it's not as spicy, the heat content isn't as great, we can go a little overboard. But that actually looks pretty good with just 1/2 cup of coarse flakes, but I am going to add another 1/4 cup. Looks pretty cool. And just for good measure, a little bit of a lagniappe. I'll just sprinkle maybe a teaspoon more. All right, so that's 3/4 cup of red pepper flakes, coarse red pepper flakes, and now the final step is to put it in our mason jar. Okay, this was the mason jar I showed you yesterday, and this is the mason jar that I'm actually going to use today, but they're both 34 ounces. Different shape. This was a little squatter, but they're both 34 ounces, so we're going to fill this. Now it may look like a lot, but we're going to be pressing it down into the bottle so that we can remove as much air as possible, because the bacteria that's forming is anaerobic. It does not require oxygen, and it functions, it proliferates and functions without air, anaerobic. So we want to make that airtight and press it down so that we remove as much air as possible. Now I'm actually going to use a plastic, I don't have any plastic gloves, so I'm going to use a plastic bag. The trick that I use is I have a bottle here that I can use to press. Alright. Now, very important, the next step is simply we are going to put this in the cupboard in a dark space and allow it to ferment. It's as simple as that. All right, and then every 6 hours or so I might check back in and just do like this. You'll hear a release of air. I won't open it all the way, but just enough to release some of the pressure inside, so it'll keep fermenting. Now it's not going to look much different from this, but usually within 24 to 48 hours is when I get too anxious and I start eating it already. So usually 24 48 hours of fermentation before it's ready, but as I said, sometimes as little as 24. One thing I'd like to point out, really important. So now the fermentation process has begun, and it's going to build up pressure inside. And even though we have a gasket, even though we have a rubber seal, even though it's airtight, there is likely going to be some seepage. And even though we might release some of the pressure every few hours, there's likely to be some seepage. So what I do is I put it in a plastic bag, just loosely close it, and I put it inside another container. So even if there's seepage, the bag will catch it, and sometimes for whatever reason it gets out into the past the bag, so I don't want it to mess up my shelf. And then what I do, I put it in a container and then lock it away. Now here's something I'd like to share with you. It's been 19 hours since we started the process, and I've discharged some of the pressure at least twice over the last 19 hours. And as you can see here, there is still some seepage that occurred. You can see all the liquid in the bottom of the plastic, and that's why I have that as well as the container. So usually what I do at this point is simply release a little pressure, reclose it, and then resume the process. It's pretty much almost done. I could actually start eating it now, but I'll wait the full 24 hours and then I'll show you what it looks like when it's all complete. Now, for you math nerds out there, it's a little bit, for the rest of you, this is probably more information than you really wanted, but here is the kimchi calculation to give you an idea of what it costs for each jar that you're going to make. So I'm going to amortize the expense of the mason jar and assume that you use it 12 times for the year, 12, once a month. So that works out to 54 cents each time you use it. The water, in my case, I buy spring water at $4.99 a gallon. So that works out to $1.13. And then based on the amounts in the video, the salt is 75 cents, cabbage is $1.93, pepper, carrots 75 cents, scallion 40 cents, ginger, garlic works out to $6.85 for a 34-ounce mason jar of kimchi, and that works out to 20 cents an ounce. Now, is this important? Well, not for me. I would do it regardless of how much it costs, even if it's more expensive than just buying it at the store. This way I have control over what the ingredients are. I know for a fact whether certain products are used or not used. So for me this is important, but just in case you want to know how much it costs, generally speaking, these costs will vary obviously based on your area, but this is what it costs me here on Saipan. Here is my finished product. Here's my Saipan made kimchi. 48 hours from start to finish, 24 hours soaking in brine, 24 hours fermenting, and some people ferment for longer, for multiple days, even weeks, and cost me 20 cents an ounce here using ingredients bought here on Saipan. I put this in my salad, I put this in even potato salad. Sometimes I may just have this as a raw side to a meal. Make sure that I have something raw in every meal as much as possible. And if you check out the video entitled 4 Reasons to Eat Food, you'll see that one of the reasons is for therapeutic value. So I like the taste, I enjoy it, but at the same time, I'm conscious of the fact that I'm eating it to restore the intestinal flora. I'm doing it for therapeutic reasons, I'm doing it for health reasons. So at this point, I put it in the refrigerator, and it will continue to ferment, but at a slower pace due to the cold. So at this point, I'll just show you what it looks like, and you'll have to imagine me actually eating it, but trust me, it tastes really nice. And let me know some of your secrets for making good kimchi, and I will see you in the next video.